But when that pandemic hit, if you owned a restaurant, didn't matter if you had the best restaurant in the world, you're done, right? I had an organic food delivery service. That's luck, right? That the whole world wanted to stay at home, was scared to go to the grocery store, and everybody wanted my product. That's just the way the world works. Now you put yourself in the best positions to get lucky, but it doesn't matter how great you are. Things can happen. The market is the market, and you have to be prepared for that.
Hey, welcome to Networkingstar. This is the podcast where we're with some of the coolest entrepreneurs and most amazing mindsets and really the people who are out there changing the world in their own way. And I am Jeffery Boyle, your host, and I am joined today by Justin Freishtat. I want to make sure that I say that properly. It's I may have messed that up a little bit, but his resume speaks for itself. As a hedge fund manager, he manages tens of millions of dollars. He's in partnership with funds that do in the billions. His resume is so big, I'm going to mess it up, but I just want to make sure, Justin, that I give you the time to make sure I didn't screw up any of all the amazing stuff that you're working on.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. You can pronounce that name however you like. One of these days, maybe I'll just change it and make it something simple and more marketable. I don't know if my family would like that, though.
Well, it's kind of thing that you certainly have accomplished a lot already, and you're coming to us from Las Vegas. But tell me a little bit, it's kind of funny. People hear about hedge fund managers, but your page is really something that people should visit. And because you talk about some of the coolest things on there. Tell me, what is your motivation as a hedge fund manager? But your page, your Instagram profile doesn't necessarily just talk about investment. What is your motivation and what propels you?
Well, the great thing about the page, the way it started, it really didn't have any intention to what it is now. It was just, let's start documenting the journey. I heard a lot of people say that they wish they started earlier. And I do wish I started earlier. But if you go back, you'll see the evolution of all the different things that I did. We were growing an organic food company. That was a family business. We did that for a long time, over a decade. That ends up getting sold to a private equity firm. And then I'm looking for what I'm going to do next. I did some coaching stuff and then, found the money space. And I always wanted to be in that world because I've been in it for a long time as a limited partner on private placements. So I was familiar with the space. I knew that's where the real returns were. And the biggest motivation to putting all this content out there is just letting the public know. Everybody who's been taught the original mainstream way of doing things, there's a whole nother world in private placement that you don't know about where things are much riskier, but that's where the real rewards are. So if you can learn the space, you can fail forward. If you want to be an investor, that's where the real Shark Tank is.
Well, you had one of your posts on there, and I went through lots of them, and that's how we met, is over Instagram. One of the things that I think struck me the most of what you said is that you never hear winners, making fun of or belittling the losers. It's always the losers that are taking shots at the winners. And that to me really struck a chord, because typically the people that are out there belly aching about people are the ones who have accomplished nothing.
Yeah, it's a sad reality, because I remember when I had nothing, and every time I saw a private jet in the sky, I'm from DC, and right outside IAD, it's one of the number one private airports in the world. And the amount of private jets flying, the amount of, Lamborghinis, all mansions. And when I first started in direct sales, I'm going into multi-million-dollar houses and then going back to my apartment. And I was never envious in a negative way. I was so inspired. Like, what did these people do to get there? Right. And what I think happens is when some people see that, and they don't see a path for them to get it, and they're not curious enough to start learning on how these people did it, they kind of mentally quit on their own life, and they have no choice but to justify other people making it by just hating on them, being negative, and tearing them down. And you can tell when you talk to somebody. I used to hide from it, right? I had a complex when I first started getting successful. I was like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm going to keep this all to myself. And then what I realized was when you talk about it, it's a duty, it's an obligation. People need to know it's possible, right? So I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. I'm going to tell everybody what I've done, what I'm doing. And in that first conversation, you're going to find out where their mindset is. And now I see it as an advantage. It's kind of a skill to read the mindset of the person that you're interacting with. And it's not about where they are on the ladder. Broke people that dream, that are inspired, I want to help that person. It doesn't matter how successful you are. There are people that are more successful than me that can find themselves in a hateful situation. So it's really just about, the vibe of the human being. I just want to work with other people who are on the same vibe, the same wavelength. If it's not fun to do business together or to collaborate, then I'm just not interested in the relationship.
People do need to follow your account, and we'll put that, of course, in the notes of this, and also have you tell people that at the end of it. But one of the things that you said that also really struck a chord with me is don't buy crap. And you said watches and homes and cars and vacations and all that kind of stuff until when? Explain that a little bit more, because I thought that was huge, that poor people buy liabilities and rich people are doing things to create assets. Explain a little bit more about how people just screw up that equation.
Yeah, it's the delayed gratification that is so difficult. It was really hard for me too. You first start making money, the first thing you want to do is go get that dream car. I fought that urge so hard for so long. I was probably 5-6 years into my career making multiple six figures, still driving just the company car. I didn't even own a car, right? It's branded, it's wrapped, it looks terrible. It's not fun to show up at your friend's house or to dinner in a company vehicle, but the goals were bigger than looking like the goals. That's the reality. You have to want the actual success more than you want the quick dopamine hit. And I cracked at one point. I'll never forget it. It was the best learning lesson ever. 6-7 years into this, I've got a couple houses. I'm starting to invest in real estate, hitting 200-300 grand a year. And I'm like, you know what? It's time to give myself something. Like, I can do it now. I'm looking at my goal pads from 10 years ago, and all of them R8. Like, I always wanted that R8. So I bought the car. I'm 2 payments into it, 2 car payments into it. And I realized I was miserable because I had to go work and then make the payment. And the joy of the car was not worth the loss of the work it needed to make that payment. So what I realized was something I already knew. I had just cracked on my mindset. I needed to keep going, keep investing until the passive income could make that payment. And then it would feel like a free car. And once I started operating that way, anything over your basic needs, it has to come from passive income. Vacations, cars, like you want to buy a nice Rolex, whatever, it's got to come from passive income. And if you can operate that way, because look, you're going to have seasons of winter in your life, right? You might lose your job. You might, if you're in the mortgage industry right now, your income cut in half, gone to zero. Like, the way you plan for that is not an emergency fund. It's indestructible assets that give you cash flow, whether your main thing is doing well or not.
Yeah, and it's interesting, even looking at your account, is that it is obvious that you have some passive income. You even explain that you're getting some returns for your clients that are really, really pretty impressive. And one that kind of struck me is that you're on a houseboat, and I'm not sure where the houseboat was, but you got somebody in the distance on the water rocket, whatever those things are called. And then you have this beautiful, spectacular houseboat at the same time. So it's obvious that you've been able to delay that to the fact that now you have a tremendous lifestyle. How is it that you get a person to really buy into that? Because there's very few people that have that discipline to wait until it's truly passive income.
I think most of us are just never going to have it. I lost sleep for years over wanting this that bad. Like, people always want to tell me what they want to do. And the reality is that if you actually wanted it, you would have it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, don't tell me what you want. Show me what you want. It's just that simple. And you gotta dive into that. Like, first it was probably read 100 books on personal development. Then it was 100 books on sales. Then it's 100 books on investing. Like, whatever you're doing, you have to be 100% all in.
Yeah.
you don't really want it.
Yeah. It's like I say, I keep referring to, because I've gone through, this is how we met, is on Instagram. And one of the things that you even talked about is really that you're able to, during COVID, during the pandemic, you're able to see massive returns where so many other people, they were really destroyed by it. How do you set yourself up to be able to handle those winters of what you're talking about, those times of nothing, to be able to thrive when other people are really struggling?
Well, not being overextended is the number one thing, because then you're going to panic. You're going to be liquidating things. You're going to be not focused on solving the real problem because you were too over leveraged, right? So it's staying small while you're going big. Delaying that's going to make it easiest. But the number one thing that I learned in the pandemic was that, I used to think everything's in your control. I mean, a lot of things are in your control, but when that pandemic hit, if you owned a restaurant, didn't matter if you had the best restaurant in the world, you're done, right? I had an organic food delivery service. That's luck, right? That the whole world wanted to stay at home, was scared to go to the grocery store, and everybody wanted my product. That's just the way the world works. Now you put yourself in the best positions to get lucky, but it doesn't matter how great you are. Things can happen. The market is the market, and you have to be prepared for that. And that was a very humbling experience for me, because I realized how lucky I was. If I had been on the other side, it would have been humbling of like, okay, I was a little too, I'm awesome, right? So no matter how great things are, you always have to know that you are one tragedy away that's out of your control from being in a serious situation. So you got to plan for that stuff, and you got to plan for what you don't know. The black swan events, they're coming.
Yeah, I think not only are coming. You talked about the winter of life. Before he passed away, Bob Proctor would always talk about just the cycles that you go through of plenty and then of really nothing. There's so many people out there that maybe are counting on a job, and the job market is constantly changing. You even look at all the warnings of artificial intelligence going to be able to wipe out certain jobs. But on the other hand, you can learn artificial intelligence, and then you can become an asset to your company rather than being picked off by it. How do you really train mindsets to an employee-minded person, or do you?
This one's tough, because I think that I used to think like anybody can be a billionaire, right? Anybody can pick up the books, work hard. Then, I started studying a lot of the neuropsychology and the hormones and the way that certain people are wired. And when you have just a crazy dopamine system like I have, I don't have a choice but to go, I just got to go, go, go. And the hardest thing is shutting that off. Other people that probably aren't wired that way, it's a battle just to show up for that 9 to 5, right? So this is one of those things where there's nothing wrong with a job. This is about you knowing who you are and then being content with that. Like, you know what I mean? So if you're an employee and you love it, that's great, because guess what? It's going to be a lot easier for you to be happy than somebody like me.
Yeah,
I can't be happy unless I'm progressing, right? So I look at like other people in my life, in my family, they have everything they want. They've got the stability, the family, the house in the burbs. And I truly believe that they are happier than a person like me who's got to drive to be happy in the journey. So I think it's totally fine to be an employee.
It's I referenced this a different. I love to watch the documentaries of successful people. I love to read the biographies and autobiographies of successful people. And one that really made an impact on me, a couple of them have been on Netflix. One is The Quarterback Show, where you see someone like Patrick Mahomes, and then you also see The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. And these elite athletes, rarely does it have to do with their physical abilities. And though they are very physically strong, it is that what you just talked about, that drive. And though there's rarely documentaries done about entrepreneurs, explain a little bit of that dopamine hit, because I think, I associate and understand exactly what you're talking about. But how do you explain that to that new entrepreneur who maybe is starting out and trying to figure out why they can't shut their brain off at night?
You gotta just know that obsession is a gift. I can't remember who said it. It's I'm going to forget what the quote is, but yeah, it's if you don't wake up obsessed, like I've been like that in everything in my life. I remember when I was 15 years old and I picked up a guitar. By the time I was 17, I was better than 99% of the guitar players on the planet. I didn't do anything but play guitar. It was the same thing when I, being a college athlete, playing hockey. Like nobody trained harder than me. If I saw somebody train harder, I was like, okay, well, I know what I need to do. I need to train harder than them. And that's just an obsession that I think is part wiring. And then if you can identify that and build on it and get better and better with your capacity, right? Because you're only going to have so much efficiency and so much capacity, but you can work on those things. So if you really want to, like my obsession now is better than it was 5 years ago. My ability to execute and time block and have more capacity to do more is something I'm working on all the time. So you're either a person who wants to live that way, or you're a person that's like, the 8 hours a day drain me. I need to decompress on Netflix, hang out with my wife and dog, like whatever it is. I like to do that too, but like I got to get my obsession out first. So just own who you are. Like we're all just trying to be happy on this planet. And for a long time, I was just like trying to turn it off. Why?
I think that's the key. And it's funny because my wife came from a family of, just the 9 to 5 type of mentality. So it was a bit of a rude awakening to marry a guy that really can't ever turn it off. And what I love about, associating with other entrepreneurs and hard chargers is all of a sudden you start to realize it's not a problem to never have to turn it off. And in fact, sometimes people look at the work as the drudgery. Well, I love coming up with solutions. I love that journey. And that's very difficult to explain to a person who perhaps doesn't have that same feeling, or just has that I'm okay with just turning it off at a certain time.
Yeah, I remembered the quote. It's obsession beats talent every time.
Yeah. I think that's a good example in just about anything that you see. Some of the most talented people in sports is so wonderful because in sports, you can see that drama play out in those 4 quarters or those 2 halves, or in hockey, you get the 3. But you can see all of that hard work come to fruition in a short amount of time. How is it that as you're talking to some of these new entrepreneurs, how do you help them prepare for that shiny object syndrome, right? Because as entrepreneurs, it's really easy for us to, oh my gosh, oh, there's one. How do you get them to focus on really what it is that's going to give them the best return?
Yeah, I think you drill down to, what do you really want, right? People start with the stuff, right? And the typical way that we're taught to set goals is, okay, you want a house, you want a car, print out a picture of it, put it where you're going to see it all day. I think that's a horrible, horrible way to set goals, because guess what you're going to do? The second you can grab that thing, you've been focusing on it so much, you're just going to go grab it prematurely, right? That's what happened with me with the R8. I waited to where anybody else would say it's not negligent, but it was negligent to my values, right? So I think it's establishing the values. Like, what do we really want, right? Let's talk about some really deep stuff. Like if you buy a car on payments and it's your dream car, but then tragedy happens in your family and somebody needs money to be taken care of, maybe it's medical bills, like these things happen every day. You're going to have a bill of regret that you prioritize the car over being able to help your family. So let's drill down to what's actually important. You need to have enough cash flow to take care of yourself, your family. Like, what if your income goes to 0? Is your family going to be okay?
Yeah.
These are real questions that we got to ask ourselves to really center our priorities, because the shiny objects are everywhere.
And I think it's in the shiny objects too of opportunities. So obviously as entrepreneurs, we push hard to be able to go buy something, but there's also some of the biggest opportunities you have to say no, because they will distract you from that main path. I am sure with the success that you have and the people that you network with, there is a lot of opportunities that come to you that you have to reject. How do you teach that? How do you teach other guys to be able to do that?
This one was really hard for me because I just want to say yes to everything, So I feel like I'll always be that way. Is I'll probably take meetings I probably shouldn't. I'll entertain things I probably shouldn't. And I've invested in things. I've I've spent money on marketing just because I met with somebody and I liked them, and I'm like, it probably won't work. You're going to have to separate business from your feelings, and that's really hard for somebody like me. Like and my greatest skill set's always been sales. I've always been driving sales everywhere I am, right? And that's because I have such a empathetic vibe. I'm always just care so much about the other person that I literally waste my own money to help them. So yeah, you just got to learn how to say no. And you get better at that, and you realize that no one's taking it personally. It's just business, and it's like anything else, right? When you get the reps, you're doing it over and over. That's how you get good at anything. I think if you don't have a lot of volume in any particular area of your life, how can you be good at it? How can you perform? And you see something over and over and over, and you get great at it. It's like the first time you do a podcast, you're terrified. Like I was terrified the first time I spoke on a stage, terrified, shaking, couldn't. And then you do it 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, and all of a sudden it's just part of your life.
Let me do one slight shift here so you can self-promote. I'm going to encourage you to self-promote. You have a fund that is producing a wonderful return for your clients. So many people, it doesn't matter if they're employees, doesn't matter if they're entrepreneurs, often say, I'll invest when, I'll invest if. What do you say to those kind of people who are not truly taking advantage of these different type of investment opportunities?
I would say start with education. You're never going to be able to pull the trigger on something you don't understand. Like that's where the fear comes from. Like I'm scared really means I don't know what this is and I don't know what's going to happen. So before you invest in private equity, read a book about private equity. Yeah. Before you invest in multifamily real estate, like I read 30 books on multifamily before I made my first deal, and I was still terrified. You're still going to be terrified, but at least you can get yourself mentally to a place where you know how to do basic due diligence. And then what also reduces the fear of getting involved is be responsible with your allocations, especially in this high risk world, private placement, hedge funds. This is where all the risk is, but it's also where all the reward is. So no matter how much you love an investment, no matter how great someone is at pitching it to you, whatever the situation is, be responsible with your allocation. If this thing goes to 0, am I going to be okay with that? If it's 5% of my portfolio, if it's 10, if it's 20, everybody's got a different answer for that percentage. But figure out what your percentage is that you would be okay if it all went away, and then start allocating it accordingly, because deals are going to go bad. It's going to happen. The worst thing you can do is put all your eggs in one basket. So it's a different type of diversification, but you got to get involved.
Yeah, just start with it. Look, Justin, I have enough questions that we could probably go a lot longer, but tell people where to go. I would strongly encourage people to follow your Instagram. And I enjoyed it. In fact, I got on the call a little bit earlier and I was just scrolling back even weeks as I was going through some of the stuff before I first found your account. Tell people where to find you on Instagram, the web, how people learn more about what you're talking about.
Yeah, so my personal website is toptierhuman.com. It's going to be changing soon. It'll just be justinfreishtat.com, but they'll both redirect to the same place. On the social medias, Kerns Capital as well. That's our hedge fund. The website is kerns.capital. And I'll just shout my name, spell it because it's tough. So it's Justin Freishtat on all the socials, Freishtat.
Yeah, it is worth a look. And the topics are really diverse in it. So it's the kind of thing that you're going to see everything from fear, overcoming fear to investing. Give me some inspiration as we end this, and I'll let you get the last word and we'll say goodbye. But tell people something that's going to change their lives.
If you haven't been through tough tragedy, try to study people who have. What I've noticed is the people who have been through the most appreciate life the most. The people who have the least give the most. These life experiences, when you have a normal day, like nothing went wrong, nothing went great, it was a normal day, that's a great day. Is what I've learned through family members getting sick, some of these new experiences I'm having where I'm feeling these emotions that, just feels horrible. You're crying every day. That's never happened to me in my whole life, but I've never been through something tragic. And it's just incredible how the timing, right? Just moved to Vegas. I'm in the most beautiful house. All my goals, everything's coming true, everything I dreamed of financially. But if you don't have your health, if your family isn't healthy, stuff like that, you can't appreciate any of it. So we're talking about personal development. We're talking about building business and getting wealthy and investing, but never lose sight of what's actually important.
Good stuff. Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Talk to you soon.